Hello there. So I've got a question about the global power structure, and this is specific about President Trump, Donald Trump. Was he a part of the global power structure as a whole, or was he fighting against it? All right, well, you could look at the history that we have about what happened when he was president. You could look at that and you could see that there was a lot of opposition in his life. There was a lot of conflict. There were a lot of different groups who had influence, who were definitely causing disruptions in his life and in his ability to solve the problems that he was trying to solve. All right. So based on that, you could perhaps say that considering the opposition that he was confronted with, it's unlikely that he was part of a lot of the global power structure. He may have been a part of, or he may be representing some of it, but not enough considering what he was able to do and what he was able to accomplish. What he said when he was wanting to be president and when he was functioning in that capacity was that he wanted to drain the swamp. That was a phrase that he used, which had a lot to do with, well, he wanted to eliminate a lot of the corruption. He wanted to solve a lot of the problems that needed to be solved. He wanted to get rid of people who shouldn't be there. These were things that he said he wanted to do. But the swamp and the corruption is just so enormous. It's so huge that there's no way to clear it out without causing so much of a disruption, without causing so many problems that everything would quite likely just break down. Now, I'm not saying that's not necessarily a bad thing, but what he didn't realize was that it was bigger than what he thought. It was much bigger. For example, there was an opinion that the Democratic Party was filled with a lot of corruption, and that there was a lot of the swamp represented there, and not so much in the Republican. But that just isn't the case. It's both sides of the political spectrum in that sense, in that you have one corrupt group that's in competition with another corrupt group in order to enjoy and exercise their corruption. That's really what you end up with. So while Trump may have wanted sincerely to make a lot of positive changes, there just wasn't much of anything that he could do. And there are a lot of lessons that we could learn from his experience, which I think is more important than to try to answer the question, well, is he part of the corruption, or is he part of the global power structure, or is he not, and to what degree and how much? I don't think we really need to know. But what I do think we should recognize is that what we saw in his efforts, what we saw was that even if you do elect the leader, to be someone who you would like to see, even if you get the guy and you get him in place, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything's going to change. It doesn't mean that, all right? Because the corruption is just so much, and the power structure is just so influential within that system that there's just no way to overcome it, even if you elect the leader otherwise. That's one of the lessons that we could learn, that we could see from that. In addition to that, you need to keep in mind what happens when this system fails, because it is going to fail at some point. What happens when it comes apart? Or if you were to consider the red button illustration, which I think is a good one. If there was a red button that you could push and then everything goes back to the way you think it ought to be, would you be willing to push that red button? Because if you do that, you're going to cause an enormous disruption in the lives of a lot of people around you. And what are they going to do? What's the world going to look like? So was he fighting against the power structure? Well, even if he was fighting against the power structure, and let's say that he won, what are you really going to end up with? What's the world really going to look like? You might find that it's very unpleasant, all right? That it's very awkward. And how are things going to be reorganized? Who's going to be a part of the reorganization? You might see a big change. You might hit the red button and then the current system all comes apart. But the system you get afterwards might very well be worse than the system you have now. It could very well be the case. It may not necessarily be better. It really depends on the people as a whole, and it depends on how they organize together and how things get put back together. And this is all totally uncertain, very much uncertain. So even if he goes back into office, if he takes the position again, what's he really going to do? And if he succeeds, what is really going to happen? There is a lot of uncertainty. From what I can tell, there is an understanding in the global power structure that the system is going to fail as a whole. And from what I can tell, there appears to be a reasonable effort of groups trying to cooperate with one another in order to bring this system down a little bit at a time instead of all at once. That appears to be the attempt that is being made by the global power structure to try to unwind all of this stuff before it does just fall apart all at once, to try to unwind it a little bit at a time. And then, we can reorganize under something else. But even if you get the president in there, or you get the president in there, you get somebody in there to make all these kinds of decisions in order to drain the swamp or to clean up the corruption or whatever. Even if you get somebody in there to do all of that, if they do, what are you really going to be left with? If I, for example, if I was miraculously asked and given the position of authority to make a decision on how to unwind all of this stuff, I know exactly what I would do. My first decision that I would make would be that I'm removing myself from this process. I just would not want to be a part of this at all. I just wouldn't. All right. Now, there's something important to understand by me saying this. Okay. You need to understand that regardless of what all these other people are doing, regardless of what all the global power structure people are involved in, and all the decisions that they're making, and what's going on with this and what's going on with that, you can still make decisions for yourself and for your own life in the midst of what you have and in the midst of what you see. So do make sure that regardless of these things, who's in charge or who isn't in charge, or who's making decisions or who isn't, or what the corruption is, always remember that you still have to make a decision concerning what you are going to do for your own life. And when you bring it down to that kind of a decision, decision-making process, you'll start to take inventory and realize that you have a tremendous amount of freedom. You can do a lot. There are not very many rules and regulations that are really in your way that will keep you from doing what you want to do to build your own personal life. You'll find that that's the case if you really look at it. Okay? So that's how I would address this issue. Whether he was a part of the global power structure or not, I don't think matters. I don't think it matters at all. You notice that he wasn't able to do much when he was there, and that's kind of how it goes, because we have a structure, we have a system that is so much bigger than what people think, and as a system, it is coming apart, And when it does, life will be different. I have no idea what that will look like, but life will definitely be different. So I hope this helps with regards to this kind of a question. Thanks.